The piercing wail of a police siren shattered the frigid stillness of a winter night. "Step out of the car now," a stern voice commanded, amplified by the biting wind. A man, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit, emerged from his luxurious vehicle. Snowflakes, like tiny diamonds, dusted his expensive fabric, each flake a whisper of ruin. Before he could utter a word of protest, his bare hands were pressed against the unforgiving, icy asphalt. He began to do push-ups, the harsh reality of the situation mirroring the bite of the cold. 1, 2, 3, he counted, his breath misting in the frigid air. The officer, a smug grin plastered across his face, stood nearby, recording the humiliating scene with an air of absolute satisfaction. Suddenly, as the man continued his grueling exercise, a leather wallet tumbled from his chest pocket, landing softly on the snow-covered ground. Curiosity piqued, the officer aimed his flashlight at it. The beam illuminated a small, gleaming object, and his satisfied expression crumbled, replaced by a dawning horror. A profound realization washed over him. He had made a colossal, irreversible mistake. This powerful, true story compels us to reflect. Remember to subscribe and activate the notification bell for more compelling daily narratives. Share your insights in the comments below, and let us know your location. We genuinely value your input. Darnell Hayes, a distinguished black man in his early 40s and a respected city council member, gripped the steering wheel of his sleek silver Mercedes C300. He navigated the hushed, snow-dusted streets of Pinecrest, a vibrant mid-sized city nestled in the northeast. Darnell had just concluded an exhaustive 6-hour city council meeting. As the diligent chair of the Police Oversight Committee, his evening had been consumed by fervent discussions concerning budget allocations, particularly a contentious proposal to escalate funding for militarized police equipment. He had passionately advocated for the redirection of these substantial funds toward vital community outreach programs and comprehensive officer training initiatives. The arduous debate had left him both mentally and emotionally depleted, his mind a whirlwind of policy and principle. The digital clock on Darnell's dashboard glowed 11:30 p.m., the thermometer a stark red, blinking a frigid 15 ring operator Fahrenheit, a biting -9 ring operator Celsius. Snow swirled with an almost lazy grace through the air, meticulously blanketing the roads in a delicate, pristine white sheet. He offered a silent, internal gratitude to his car, a sanctuary shielding him from the relentless, biting cold outside. The nighttime streets were eerily, unsettlingly quiet, the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers cutting through the falling snow, providing an odd, almost meditative comfort. Darnell's thoughts drifted affectionately to Angela, his beloved wife, who he knew was patiently awaiting his return home, a warm, comforting meal prepared, and words of encouragement ready to soothe his weary spirit. Their modest yet incredibly cozy home, a haven of warmth and familiarity, was merely 20 minutes away. He could almost physically feel the profound relief that would wash over him the moment he stepped through their front door. As he neared a stretch of road lined with dimly lit, darkened storefronts, Darnell's gaze instinctively flickered to his rearview mirror. Piercing flashes of red and blue lights abruptly tore through the peaceful, snow-kissed darkness. His heart sank as a patrol car materialized behind him, its sirens now blaring with an insistent, unnerving urgency. Darnell's intuition, a primal alarm, screamed trouble, but he forced himself to maintain a facade of calm, a practiced composure in the face of escalating tension. Obediently, he signaled and pulled his vehicle over, coming to a stop directly beneath the soft, melancholic glow of a yellow street lamp. The freezing air outside seemed to seep insidiously into his very thoughts, clouding them, making clear reasoning a challenge. Taking a slow, measured breath, he glanced at the dashboard, confirming his speedometer was well within the legal limit. His car, a testament to meticulous care, was in pristine condition, having been freshly serviced just the previous week. There was no conceivable reason for him to be stopped, or at least, none that his rational mind could conjure. Adjusting his rearview mirror with a deliberate movement, Darnell watched the approaching officer. Their flashlight beams sliced through the falling snow, the intense light reflecting off the mirror and directly into his eyes, momentarily dazzling him. Sitting upright, his posture rigid, his heartbeat a steady, insistent rhythm against his ribs, his senses acutely heightened on an almost primal alert. As a black man, he was acutely, painfully familiar with how these encounters could spiral, could escalate unpredictably, even when he adhered meticulously to every rule, every protocol. The first officer arrived, his stocky frame cast in sharp relief by the street lamp's illumination. He rapped sharply on the driver's side window with his knuckles, his name tag conspicuously displaying Officer Bradley. His tone carried the undeniable authority of someone accustomed to unquestioning obedience. "License and registration," Bradley demanded, omitting any pretense of a formal greeting, his voice clipped and impatient. "Good evening, officer," Darnell replied calmly, his hands already busying themselves with the practiced retrieval of his wallet and documents. His father, a retired police officer himself, had instilled in him the fundamental principles of navigating such encounters. Comply without question, avoid confrontation at all costs, for resistance, however slight, could perilously escalate the situation. "May I ask why I'm being stopped?" Darnell added, his voice even as he extended his documents to the officer. Bradley did not respond immediately, his eyes, sharp and scrutinizing, poring over Darnell's driver's license with the intensity of a hawk observing its prey. A second officer, Reynolds, stood silently near the passenger side, his expression grim, his flashlight methodically scanning the car's interior, its beam piercing the darkness. "Your taillight's out," Bradley finally declared, his tone laced with an almost triumphant certainty. Darnell frowned, a flicker of genuine confusion crossing his face. "I'm sorry, officer, but that's not correct. I just had my car serviced last week." "Are you calling me a liar?" Bradley interrupted, his voice abruptly rising in volume, its timbre now laced with open aggression. He took a deliberate step back, adjusting his belt in a manner that made the holstered gun at his hip more prominently visible, a clear, intimidating and deeply unsettling gesture. "Not at all, sir," Darnell replied carefully, his voice a calm counterpoint to the officer's rising anger. "I'm simply suggesting there might be a misunderstanding." Reynolds, still peering into the car's interior, chimed in, his voice laced with an unwelcome insinuation. "This is a nice car for this area. What are you doing out here so late?" Darnell turned slightly, meeting the officer's scrutinizing gaze directly, his brow furrowing in a mixture of bewilderment and growing irritation. "I'm heading home after work. Is that a problem?" Reynolds chuckled, a dismissive, mocking sound dripping with sarcasm. "Working this late, huh? Must be busy." Darnell hesitated, feeling the invisible tendrils of tension coil and tighten around him. Bradley leaned closer to the window, his breath fogging the cold glass. "Step out of the car." Darnell blinked, his stomach clenching with a familiar dread. "Is that necessary, officer? It's freezing outside and I haven't done anything wrong." "I said step out of the car immediately," Bradley repeated, his voice now a booming command, leaving no room for negotiation. Darnell took a deep, steadying breath, his mind racing, weighing the precarious balance of his rights against the very real danger of refusing. He knew instinctively that while he had every right to refuse, doing so could easily escalate the situation to a far more perilous degree. After a moment of frustrated internal debate, he unbuckled his seatbelt and pushed open the door. The icy wind lashed at him instantly, snowflakes clinging tenaciously to his tailored suit as he stepped onto the treacherously slippery sidewalk. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Reynolds ordered, his flashlight beam cutting directly into Darnell's face, momentarily blinding him. Darnell complied, raising his hands slightly. His fingers were already beginning to succumb to the biting cold, the frigid air cutting into his bare skin, numbing him. Bradley slowly circled Darnell, as if performing a meticulous inspection of a common criminal, his heavy boots crunching loudly on the freshly fallen snow. After a deliberate, unsettling pause, Bradley spoke. "Driving with a broken taillight is illegal, my friend." "It's not broken," Darnell stated firmly, his voice unwavering despite the internal tremor of anger. "Excuse me." Bradley's tone turned instantly icy, his eyes narrowing. Darnell took a small, decisive step forward, meeting the officer's gaze directly, his resolve hardening. "I said my taillight isn't broken. If you check it, you'll see it's working perfectly." The street grew even quieter, the freshly fallen snow muffling the distant, sporadic sounds of traffic, amplifying the tension between them. A few windows in nearby buildings now glowed faintly, silhouettes shifting within as curious residents peered out, drawn by the unusual commotion. Bradley's lips pressed into a thin white line, a clear sign of his simmering frustration. "All right, you think you're above the law, huh? Drop down and give me 20 push-ups." Darnell froze, the absurd words hanging in the biting air like the snowflakes falling around him. "With all due respect, officer, did you just say what I think you said?" "You heard me," Bradley replied, a triumphant smirk returning to his face. 20 push-ups, right here, right now." Darnell's chest tightened, the biting cold suddenly forgotten in the surging storm of anger and indignation rising within him. "That's not standard procedure for a traffic stop," he stated, his voice steady, controlled, yet undeniably laced with defiance. Bradley stepped closer, his hand now resting pointedly on his taser, a silent, menacing threat. "Are you refusing a lawful order from an officer of the law?" Reynolds snickered from behind him, pulling out his phone. "You better do it. You don't want to make this worse for yourself." Darnell's gaze dropped to the ground, the icy pavement glistening malevolently under the dim street lamp. His mind raced, frantically weighing his limited options. Around him, more lights flickered on in nearby buildings, and shadows shifted as residents, their curiosity now fully engaged, looked outside to investigate the unfolding commotion. Slowly, reluctantly, Darnell knelt, the insidious cold immediately seeping through the expensive fabric of his tailored pants. The sheer injustice of the situation burned within him, a searing ember, but he knew with absolute certainty that any resistance, however slight, would only escalate this perilous encounter further. As he placed his bare hands on the frozen pavement, his wedding rings scraped lightly against the thin, unforgiving layer of ice. His breath plumed in the frigid air as he began to count aloud, his voice a low, steady chant. 1, 2, 3. Each push-up felt like a brutal blow to his dignity, a deliberate assault on his standing, yet his resolve remained unshaken, steely and unyielding. Above him, Reynolds continued to laugh, his phone camera meticulously capturing the entire humiliating scene, making mocking comments that only added to the bone-deep chill of the winter night. The absurd spectacle of two uniformed officers standing over a well-dressed man performing push-ups in the dead of a freezing night was not merely being recorded by Officer Reynolds. Nearby residents, now fully engaged spectators watching from the illuminated windows of their homes, had also pulled out their phones, diligently capturing every word, every movement, every agonizing second of the unfolding drama. The icy ground, relentlessly cold, soaked through Darnell's tailored pants as he continued the humiliating exercise, his palms pressed firmly against the freezing surface. His hands began to go numb, the intense cold cutting sharply into his resolve, challenging his endurance. 4, 5, 6, he counted, his breath clearly visible in the frigid air, steady but tinged with a silent, simmering anger. Behind him, Officer Reynolds continued to snicker, his phone camera meticulously capturing every humiliating moment. "That's it, Councilman," Reynolds mocked, his voice laced with a cruel amusement. "Keep those elbows tucked. We wouldn't want any sloppy form now, would we?" 7, 8, Darnell's voice faltered briefly, a barely perceptible tremor as his arms began to tremble, not just from the exertion, but from the insidious cold seeping into his very bones. His breathing quickened, becoming more labored, but he pressed on, refusing to grant the officers the profound satisfaction of witnessing him surrender, of seeing him quit. Suddenly, with a soft, almost imperceptible thud, his elegant leather wallet, which had been securely tucked away in his chest pocket, slipped out and fell onto the snowy, wet pavement. It landed open slightly, revealing a glimpse of its contents under the stark, unforgiving glow of the street lamp. Reynolds, ever observant, noticed the wallet's fall, and his curiosity, an insidious spark, quickly ignited. He tilted his head, then with a swift movement shone his flashlight directly onto the fallen wallet. His smug expression, previously so confident, shifted almost imperceptibly, first to confusion, then with startling rapidity to alarm. Bradley," he stammered, his voice now noticeably quieter, a tremor of uncertainty in his tone, "you might want to take a look at this." Bradley, who had been observing with an air of detached amusement, stopped in his tracks. He crouched down beside the wallet, his gloved fingers carefully, almost reverently, picking it up. His eyes, now wide with an emerging sense of dread, scanned its contents until they landed on a gleaming badge-like card. It read in stark, undeniable lettering, Darnell Hayes, City Council Member, Chair of the Police Oversight Committee. Bradley's face drained of all color, his smug grin vanishing completely, replaced by a ghastly, wide-eyed look of absolute panic as the terrible realization dawned upon him with the force of a physical blow. He quickly stood, still clutching the wallet, and whirled on Reynolds, his voice a low, frantic hiss, barely audible, yet laced with raw, unadulterated fear. "You didn't think to check who this guy was before pulling this stunt?" Reynolds shrugged, his previous arrogance, his condescending bravado, now entirely replaced by a palpable, visible anxiety. "How was I supposed to know? He's just some guy in a fancy car." "No," Bradley snapped, his voice shaking slightly, betraying his mounting terror. "He's not just some guy." Still kneeling on the freezing ground, Darnell slowly, deliberately stood, brushing the clinging wet snow from his pants and suit with precise, almost surgical movements. His shoulders were squared, his posture commanding, and his expression, while calm, was undeniably resolute, an unyielding force. The very atmosphere around them seemed to undergo a profound, almost seismic shift as the balance of power, once so clearly in the officer's favor, tilted dramatically, irrevocably. "Am I free to leave now, officers?" Darnell asked, his voice calm, yet underscored by an undeniable, quiet authority that resonated in the chilly air. "Mr. Hayes, sir, I didn't mean to," Bradley began to stammer, his words tripping over each other. "Am I free to leave?" Darnell repeated, his dark eyes locking onto Bradley's, an unyielding intensity in their depths. "Yes, of course," Bradley mumbled, his voice barely a whisper as he practically thrust the wallet back toward Darnell, eager to divest himself of its damning contents. As Darnell meticulously slipped his wallet back into his pocket, his gaze flickered to Reynolds, who was hastily, almost frantically, lowering his phone, attempting to conceal it. "Don't delete that video," Darnell said, his tone steady, firm, yet laced with an undeniable steel. "Destroying evidence is a serious offense, Officer Reynolds." Reynolds froze, his hand hovering uncertainly over his phone screen, a deer caught in headlights. "I wasn't going to," he stammered, his voice thin and reedy. Darnell took a deliberate step closer to the two officers, his presence, despite his now soaked suit, commanding and undeniable. "Let me make one thing clear," he said, his voice sharp, composed, yet vibrating with controlled intensity. "I will not tolerate any abuse of power, especially not in this city, and certainly not from officers who have sworn an oath to protect it." Bradley opened his mouth to respond, to offer some inadequate excuse, but Darnell raised a hand, a silent, authoritative gesture that effectively silenced him. "By tomorrow morning," Darnell continued, his voice unwavering, "I expect full, detailed reports on this incident. I want an explanation as to why your body cameras were off, why you pulled me over, and why you thought this behavior was acceptable. Those reports will be on my desk by 9 a.m. sharp." Both officers nodded stiffly, their earlier arrogance, their smug superiority, now utterly replaced by a palpable, chilling fear of immediate, decisive professional repercussions. "Good evening, gentlemen," Darnell said, his voice now icy, devoid of any warmth. He turned sharply and walked back to his car, his wet shoes crunching loudly against the pristine snow, each step a testament to his unwavering resolve. Darnell returned to the driver's seat of his car, the gentle warmth of the heater barely registering against the intense flames of anger and grim determination burning fiercely within him. Blowing into his frozen hands, attempting to coax feeling back into his numb fingers, he started the car and slowly drove off. In the rearview mirror, he caught a final lingering glimpse of the two officers, standing awkwardly and silently in the falling snow, their figures starkly illuminated by the dim, unforgiving glow of the street lamp, their humiliation radiating even from a distance. As Darnell Hayes drove away from the scene, his grip on the steering wheel tightened, a white-knuckled testament to the internal turmoil he now navigated. His expensive suit was soaked through, his hands scraped and raw from the icy pavement, and his dignity, though bruised, remained defiantly intact. His resolve, however, had never been stronger, forged in the crucible of this injustice. On a dark, frigid night filled with egregious missteps and blatant abuses of power, the two officers stood under the faint, unforgiving glow of the street lamp, rigid and utterly humiliated in the relentless falling snow. They had been so confident, so brazen in their authority, until the devastating, job-threatening realization of exactly who they were dealing with crashed down upon them. Their sudden, dramatic shift in demeanor was almost comically absurd, yet Darnell could find no humor in it, no fleeting moment of satisfaction. This wasn't merely about him, about his personal humiliation. This was about every single citizen in the city who didn't carry a prestigious city council badge in their wallet. Every person who lacked the inherent power to push back against such blatant, audacious abuse of authority. As he turned onto his quiet, familiar street, Darnell's phone buzzed insistently on the passenger seat. It was Angela, his wife. He could vividly imagine her gnawing worry, her quiet anxiety, as he contemplated how he would explain the night's disturbing events. But not tonight, he decided. He needed time to fully process the chaotic, emotionally charged sequence of events, and to meticulously prepare for the significant, arduous battle that lay inevitably ahead. When he finally pulled into his driveway, Darnell lingered in the car for a long, reflective moment, his breath fogging the windows, each exhale a visible manifestation of his weighty thoughts. The full, crushing weight of the night's events pressed heavily upon him, a physical burden. He had heard countless stories like this before, hundreds of them, during his extensive tenure on the Police Oversight Committee. He had listened with empathy as countless citizens, their voices often trembling with fear, recounted their profound frustration, their crippling helplessness in the face of such systemic misconduct. And now he truly, deeply understood. He stepped out of the car, the snow crunching softly beneath his feet as he walked with a new, determined purpose toward his front door. Angela greeted him with a concerned, questioning look, her eyes mirroring her unspoken worries. But before she could voice a single question, he leaned in, kissed her cheek tenderly and quietly, reassuringly said, "We'll talk in the morning, love." He concluded the cold, tumultuous night with the simple, restorative comfort of a hot shower and a late, comforting dinner by his wife's side, finding a brief, much-needed moment of solace, of profound peace, in her unwavering company. By 7 a.m. the following morning, Darnell was seated resolutely at his expansive desk, a steaming cup of dark coffee clutched firmly in his hand, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold anger still simmering within him. His diligent assistant, usually arriving later, had been called in early, and a formidable stack of documents lay neatly arranged before him. Complaints from citizens, official departmental policies, and meticulously logged body camera usage records. All undeniable evidence of a deeply entrenched recurring pattern of misconduct that he could no longer in good conscience ignore. As he meticulously typed an email to the police chief, requesting an urgent, unscheduled emergency meeting with the Oversight Committee, Darnell's unwavering determination crystallized into a sharp, unyielding resolve. What had transpired the night before was not, he knew with absolute certainty, an isolated incident. It was a glaring symptom of a much larger, more insidious problem, one he was now more committed than ever to addressing head-on, with every fiber of his being. "This ends today," he muttered to himself, the words both a solemn promise and an unshakable declaration, echoing in the quiet solitude of his office. By the end of the day, he vowed the entire city would know unequivocally that fundamental systemic change was not just coming, it was already here. The morning sun rose, a tentative pale orb over Pine Crest, illuminating a city blissfully unaware of the monumental storm brewing within its hallowed government offices. By precisely 9 a.m., Darnell Hayes sat with an air of quiet authority at the head of the polished council table, a formidable stack of meticulously compiled reports, citizens' complaints, and irrefutable video evidence spread out before him like instruments of justice. Around him, his fellow council members gathered, their expressions a curious mixture of apprehension and mounting unease. News of the previous night's shocking incident had already begun to spread like wildfire throughout the city, fueled in large part by the compelling video footage captured by observant nearby residents. Darnell opened the meeting with a calm yet undeniably commanding voice, his words resonating with a quiet power that demanded attention. "Last night," he began, his gaze sweeping across the room, meeting each council member's eyes, "I experienced firsthand what so many of our citizens endure on a regular basis: intimidation, humiliation, and a blatant abuse of power by those sworn to protect us." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to settle. "This isn't just my story, it's our city's story. And today it ends." With a decisive press of a button on his laptop, Darnell projected a stark raw video onto the large screen behind him. The footage, chilling in its clarity, meticulously detailed the officers' unconscionable actions, from the baseless, unwarranted traffic stop to their cruel taunts and demeaning demands. Gasps of shock and outrage rippled through the room as the humiliating, utterly indefensible scene unfolded, captured with irrefutable clarity from multiple angles. The evidence was undeniable, irrefutable, leaving no room for doubt or denial. Darnell then laid out a series of immediate, non-negotiable actions: mandatory use of body cameras for all officers, accompanied by far stricter penalties for any non-compliance, comprehensive de-escalation training programs for every officer on the force, and the immediate establishment of an independent civilian oversight board, empowered with genuine authority. The council, their collective urgency amplified by the widespread attention the incident had garnered overnight, unanimously and without hesitation supported his transformative proposals. By late afternoon, the resignations of Officers Bradley and Reynolds were officially announced, followed swiftly by a public abject apology from the police chief, broadcast across all local news outlets. News outlets across the entire state covered the story with fervor, heralding it as a pivotal watershed moment for accountability, transparency, and much-needed reform in law enforcement. As Darnell stepped out of City Hall that evening, the crisp air a welcome balm, he was greeted by a spontaneous, enthusiastic crowd of supporters, grateful citizens who for the first time in a long time, finally felt truly seen, genuinely heard, and authentically represented. Though the raw, lingering scars of the previous night's ordeal still remained, a quiet ache within him, he knew with absolute certainty that this was merely the beginning of a much larger, ongoing fight. Pinecrest had irrevocably changed forever, and so too had his unwavering, resolute fight for true justice. Join the burgeoning movement for justice. Subscribe to the channel, share your profound thoughts in the comments section below, and integrate these vital stories into your daily life. Together, united in purpose, we can forge real, lasting change, transforming injustice into hope.